My name is Ken Harvey. My date of birth is the 7th and the 1st of 1941. I was born at Locust Grove, Oklahoma.
This interview is for the Farmington Oral History Project, and we just want to verify that we have your permission for this interview.
Yes, you have my permission for the interview.
Thank you. Who were your parents?
Rosa and Dick Harvey. My parents were Rosa and Dick Harvey.
All right. Tell me about your family when you were growing up as a child. Who were your siblings?
Well, I had 5 sisters, and I had 3 brothers.
Tell me about your family's business. What business was your family in?
My family's business was, my dad was a sawmill operator. He had a sawmill from the time I remember anything and worked in the timber, but he was also a minister. And he would preach of a night and work the sawmill of a day. Of course, we had a little farm, sort of, not a big farm, just a little farm. We had chores to do around home.
What was your part in the family business? What would you do to help?
Anything I was big enough to, when I was growing up, I did anything I was big enough to do, because back then, it seemed like everybody had to work to keep things afloat.
Tell me some of the things you would do.
Well, excuse me. Some of the things I would do was milk a cow, feed the pigs, feed the chickens, and when I wasn't in school, I would help my dad at the sawmill. And I'd do different jobs around the sawmill, things that I could do that I was big enough to do.
When did y'all move to Northwest Arkansas?
I remember moving to Northwest Arkansas. Actually, I was just a little bitty thing, but I can remember just little skits of it. Things that would stick out to a kid, you know. But we came from Oklahoma over here when I was very small.
You talked about working on the farm and at the mill. What other jobs did you work outside of your family's business?
Well, when I was 14 years old, I asked Tex Wagner. He had a little pastry shop at Fayetteville, and I asked him about working there, and he said, no, he said, you need to go to school, take a book and, you know, pay attention to your schoolwork. He said, you don't need to be working on a job. You're too small and you're not old enough. But I kept aggravating him until finally he gave me a little job at the pastry shop, and I worked there. Well, I went ahead working there, and I was working there when my wife and I got married.
Tell me about your earliest memories of coming to Farmington.
My earliest memories, I remember that my earliest thinking was the roads were all dirt. There wasn't no paved roads in Farmington. I remember the old store buildings down here. There were stores still in the buildings. The old Whites people named Whites had a store down here. A little later on, Davis's had a store down here. I remember that. And the school was very small. The old bleachers that we sat on when we had a football game were pretty rackety. But Farmington was a nice place to live. Had some beautiful people, and it was nice.
Where did you live growing up?
As I was growing up, I lived over around Wheeler. And then my dad bought a place on West 16, which is called Weddington now. And by the way, it was dirt all the way from our house to Siloam Springs.
Tell me about going to school. When you were first starting as a kid, where did you go to school? And then tell me for the rest of the years.
Okay, well, when I was first in school, well, I went to White Oak School. I don't know if you know where that's at or not, but it's between here and Tawnytown. And it was just an old one-room school. And the teacher, we had a man teacher. His name was Mr. Danforth. He taught grades 1 through 12 in a one-room school. Well, after I left there, I went to Harmon School for a while. And then I went to Farmington School for a while, and I went back to Fayetteville School, Leverett School, up there by the university. And the reason for that was we had moved, and it threw us in Fayetteville District, so I had to go to Fayetteville School. And the bus would come from Fayetteville out, and the buses plumb into Fayetteville.
What was it like when you went to Farmington School? Tell me what you remember about it.
Well, what I remember about it, that's where I met my wife. She used to sit in front of me in class, but I didn't know she was going to be my wife then. But I remember Farmington School being not a big school. It was bigger than my little one-room school that I had went to when I first started to school. But I remember the roads being dirt. I remember the old school buildings. One of them burnt while I was going to school there. And then we had the old gymnasium, which that's actually the only, it and the office over there is the only two buildings that are left of old Farmington School. We've built all new buildings. The old rock building that used to be on the corner over there, I didn't want it tore down because it had a lot of memories for me. After I had grown up, I worked for Farmington School. I was a bus driver for Farmington School. I did the maintenance at Farmington School. I did the maintenance on the buses for Farmington School. And I did all of it out of this little old rock building that sat on the corner over there. And the only thing I could get in there when I'd go to work on a bus was the nose of the bus. That's all I could get in the building. But it had a lot of sentimental value. And I did talk them into packaging up the rocks that they took off of it. And far as I know, the rocks are still over at Farmington School. They're great big sand rocks. And I tried to get them to not tear the building down, to reface it and do something of value with it. But they ended up tearing it down because they said it was made a blind spot over there.
What grades were you in when you went to Farmington, if you remember?
5 and 6.
Do you remember any of your teachers or classmates?
I remember classmates. The teachers, I really don't remember the teachers. I'm thinking Miss Webb was one of them. But I remember Wayne Reef as a classmate. And my wife, Patsy Clevenger, she was a classmate.
When you were a kid going to school here, who were some of the people, the business owners and people in town that you remember meeting?
Well, I remember the people that lived here. I remember the Alvin Andrews and his family that lived here in Farmington. I remember the Reef family. The Davis family. I remember Roy Humble. I knew him for years and years. The businesses, like I say, I remember the old White store. I remember the Davis store, and I remember DeLance Phillips had a store. We had the Baptist Church, and we had the Church of Christ on Main Street down here. I remember the old VFW post that was set down there. I think that old building may still be down there.
There was a time when you got involved with helping the city raise money and put on a concert to establish a fire department. Tell me what you remember about that.
Well, I remember we had Ernest Tubb. He did 2 shows for us to start the fire department in Farmington. There was a lot of people involved in that. I have a book that has a lot of names of sponsors. People sponsored getting Ernest Tubb to come and do this to raise funds for the volunteer fire department. Farmington had one fire truck, a little bitty truck, wasn't very big. But I do remember that. Bill Andrews was the fire chief. Bobby Carlaw was the mayor of Farmington. And but getting back to Ernest, he did 2 shows, and the old gym, it's still standing over here, the old gym was full, both shows that he did. And we did real good on raising some funds. We got the fire department and got it being active in Farmington.
How big a deal was that to establish a fire department? How important was that to the local community?
Well, it was very, to do that was very important because, Farmington wasn't a big town, but it was began to grow. And you need to, you need some kind of protection. And of course, we had I think at that time when we first did that, I think we had 1 police officer. And then when we got the fire department going, well, I was a volunteer fireman at that time. when we got it going. I volunteered, and I don't know, I think they may be a diploma somewhere around the fire station here, if a person could find it. Whenever I graduated from Fayetteville School of Fire up there, I went up there took a class. But all of us was volunteer at that time.
Tell me about the senior center, how you got involved with helping that. You helped them raise some money.
The senior center, Wanda and Russell Spears was very active in getting money raised for the senior center. Wanda called me and she said, "Would you do music for us?" And I said, "I sure will." So I played music. They would make up food baskets. My wife and I would deliver them. And we did this, and we did fundraiser after fundraiser to get matching money for the senior center here. And we finally raised what we needed to raise. But I was active in it. Wanda and Russell was more active than I was, but we got it done. And I'm proud of the center over here, because not only because I had a little part in helping with it, but it's something that was very, very needed for the community. And I'm very proud of the center.
Talk about your music. You've been playing for many years, and you've used that to help raise money. How'd you get involved in music?
Well, I got involved in music whenever I was, actually, when I learned to play, I was 5 years old. My dad was a musician. He could play just about any instrument he wanted to play. And so I guess it was bred in me to play music. But I started out playing when I was 5 years old. My uncle had sent me a ukulele. And by the way, it was a Martin ukulele, which was an expensive one. And I learned to play that. And that's how I started in music. And then, of course, I just kept graduating out of one thing into another, you know. Music is something that you never learn it all. It's just something that you can always learn more. If you get where you think you learned all of it, then you're in bad shape. You're not going to progress anymore, because you can always learn in music, and it's very, very rewarding, not only to the person that plays the music, it's very rewarding to the people that listen to the music.
Talk about whenever Ernest Tubb was here and you had a chance to go to Nashville. Tell me about that chance and why you didn't take it.
Well, first off, Alvin Andrews knew Ernest Tubb. Alvin was from Denton, Texas, and him and Ernest Tubb, as boys, rode horses together down there and just had a good time. This was before Ernest Tubb became the singer, Ernest Tubb. Well, whenever we was going to have him come here to do some concerts for us, Alvin said, "I'll introduce you to Ernest Tubb when he gets here." Well, Alvin did. He introduced me to Ernest Tubb. And he told Ernest, he said, "Ken plays music for us around here, and we enjoy him." So Ernest said, "Well, let's go out on the bus." So we went out on Ernest's big Silver Eagle bus, which was sitting over here by the gymnasium. And Ernest give me the guitar that Jimmy Rogers had gave him and said, play me something. So I did. Well, he said, I want you to come to Nashville. So he ended up giving me a contract. And he told me, he said, now this will be one night stands, because you'll have to be promoted, and that's the way we promote you. You got to be here one night and you got to be somewhere else the next night. But my son was little, and I was always raised, family comes before anything else. And so I'd look at my little boy and I'd look at the contract and I wouldn't sign it. I told Ernest, I said, I'm gonna turn it down, because I said, I can't leave my son. He's little and I can't do it. And that's how it come about.
Talking earlier about playing for the senior center, and how many concerts did you do for them? Do you remember? Tell me about how many it was.
You know, I don't know. I did lots of them. Lots of them. I wish I had kept track, but I didn't. I never give it a thought. But that's like after we got the senior center built and everything, and I started hauling meals. My wife and I, we haul meals. And we did it for 15 years after we got the center built. I wish I would have kept track of all the meals that we hauled, which would have took quite a bit of paper, because we hauled a lot of meals. Because I was hauling at the last part, I was hauling probably, I don't know, maybe close to 60 meals a day, you know. But I didn't keep track. I wished I had, but I can only say it was a lot. We did a lot of fundraisers.
You talked earlier, we talked about the fire department and getting them set up. Did you ever go to any of those annual firemen's pancake breakfasts they would have?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Talk about that. How big a deal is that? How many people come to those?
Well, I can tell you that here at the fire station here, a lot of times you have to look for a seat, so it's a pretty big deal. They do good off of their breakfast. Their breakfast is good. They have good breakfast. But not only is that, it's the fellowship that you get. I mean, you come in here and you know 99% of the people that's here, you know. And it's just a great thing to be able to sit down and fellowship with people. And maybe some of them, maybe that might be the only time you might see them till next year when we have the next pancake breakfast. But it's a big deal. It raises, I don't know how much money it raises for the fire department, but I know it helps.
Do you remember going back when they first started doing those in the old fire station? Talk about that.
Yeah, I remember, now then they have more ways of cooking than they did back then. But I remember that the guys, the firemen, they always enjoy that, cooking that stuff, you know. And it was on a smaller scale when we was in the old fire station, but it's grown. It's just like everything else. It's grown.
What are some of this town has really grown a lot over the years. What are some of the things you remember growing and changing over the decades?
You talking about
Yes.
Farmington here?
Yes.
Okay.
Farmington. All the
Okay.
changes. I know it's been a lot, but what are some of the things that stand out?
Well, the traffic is probably the biggest thing that stands out among most everybody around here, because there's times that you can't hardly get on and off the street out here, like early of a morning or of an evening. But that's one of the big things that I noticed that's really changed. Of course, we've got a lot of new businesses that's come in here. We have Domino's Pizza, we have DQ, we have Casey's, McDonald's, Sonic. Now then we're getting over here Taco Place, Taco Bell. It's grown tremendously in the past 5 years. It's really grown.
Going back to the old days, when you were a kid growing up in this general area, what were some of the things that you and your friends would do for fun?
Well, we did a lot of things when we were kids. But I can say this, and this is truthfully, it's not just saying something to be saying something, but we did not ever, as kids, I don't remember us ever destroying anything. We did mischievous stuff that kids would do, but we never destroyed any property. And today, I look at young people, and I think, why are you so angry? Why are you so set on destroying things? I was always taught that you respected other people's things. And a lot of times, this day and time, people don't they just don't respect nothing, seem like.
When you were a kid growing up in this area, what would your parents and their friends do for fun?
What would we do for fun? Okay, we had no television. We would have cookouts. That was fun. Neighbors would come in. We'd play games. And my dad, he was quite a musician. And after all was said and done, and things were took care of during the day that we had to take care of, well, he'd get his fiddle, and he'd tell me, go get a guitar. And we'd sit down on the front porch, and we'd begin to play. And the next thing, there'd be neighbors that'd come in. Well, they'd play. And we made our own entertainment, whether it was having a picnic lunch and playing games, or whether it was sitting on the front porch playing music. We made our own entertainment, because we didn't, we had no TV. You might get to go to the moving picture show sometime or other, but if you was lucky enough to have a nickel. But we pretty much entertained ourselves.
If somebody who had never been to Farmington before said, tell me about your town of Farmington, what would you tell them?
About my account?
About Farmington. They said, tell me about Farmington. What would you tell them?
I'd tell them that it's an awful good place to live. Farmington, we have very little crime rate. We have the store people that we have here is nice at the stores. Our police department is very, very nice people. They take care of things. They protect us, and they're very good people. Our fire department, you couldn't ask for any better. I don't care anywhere you went, you couldn't ask for better. We have, from my notion, we have the top of the line fire chief. Don't you tell him I said that. But he's a great guy. And Farmington is just a nice place. It's a good, clean little town.
If you had to complete this sentence, how would you do it? My favorite thing about Farmington is?
My favorite thing about Farmington is they put up with me.